Okay, first I want to say thank you to SiteGround and for Besco for putting on this event and having us, and for Maya and Isra in particular for being so helpful in getting everything organized. I much prefer to have this be a dialogue and to kind of take the conversation wherever you guys want to. I'm mostly just here to share a couple stories about some of the companies that we have built over the years. And so if you have any questions or any topics you want to go into, or just tell me more about that company, please speak up. So to start off, I kind of want to get a read of the room. How many people in here are founders? Awesome. How many people hopefully would like to become a founder? Okay. How many people are either like students or affiliated with some sort of university? All right. A good mix of all of the above. Fantastic. Great. So you guys already got a brief introduction about me, but just very quickly, I run a fund called Echelon, which we've just mostly been finding founders that we really want to build companies around, where we have high conviction in them, and helping them build their company from day one. We've invested about 50 million. That has catalyzed about 100 times that in market value, including some of the companies we're going to talk about. I am a professor of energy science and engineering at Stanford, where I teach a class called Stanford Climate Ventures. That is a graduate level entrepreneurship class, specifically around climate and energy, that we've been teaching since 2017, that has launched over 50 companies with over $1 billion in funding. And both of these are nothing more than just entrepreneurial communities just like this one. Our goal in starting both of these was, can we just get people who are really passionate about a particular topic or sector together in the room, say, what is it you want to work on, and just work on getting one roadblock after the next out of their way to let them go start these things. And so I love seeing this community here, because it feels like one of the same kind of things as what we've done at these. So most of what I want to say today is basically just talk about some of the companies we've helped build and the patterns that we have seen emerge in the successful ones. And those three things that come up time and time again are these. Most of these founders, they take a different path than what is traditional. There is no linearity to starting one of these companies. And often it actually comes in ways that you would never expect before. And those unique paths lead them to understand something or see an opportunity that nobody else has seen. But it doesn't come from being smarter or thinking about the problem harder. It comes from doing the work of just being in the space longer than anybody else. And then in building the company, having a singular focus and aligning every piece of the company around what I call your 10X, your thing that you do better than any other company in the world. So first, living on a different frequency. Oops. To talk about some of the paths that entrepreneurs take, I kind of want to start with the story of one of our founders. Bryan is not a climate founder. He's actually in the Web3 space. But I think his story illustrates really well how sometimes the dots only make sense when you look backwards in the life of someone who goes on to be a great founder. So Bryan grew up in New Hampshire, one of the smallest states in America, with a love for gaming and problem solving. He was playing board games. He was playing video games. He started playing card games, which comes up later in his life. He then went to the University of New Hampshire to study computer science, something that came from his love of computer games, and then started to play poker very seriously, stemming from his love of card games. That actually led to him going on to become a professional poker player, including winning the World Series of Poker, having one of the top finishes in 2012. And by that time, he basically had said, all right, I've won this challenge. What's my next challenge? And that's when he started getting interested in crypto, kind of doing some random things in about 2013. And then he kind of just parked that passion for a while. Went on to do data science. That's actually where we met him. We started working on data science for baseball betting back in the day. And that also led to him working with Noam Brown, who is one of the top AI researchers for Meta and OpenAI now, and really trying to understand kind of what was the intersection of the things that he was passionate about. And that led to him starting to work with two of his best friends from the University of New Hampshire, Ryan Zarek and Caleb Bannister, and just trying to figure out, what do we have fun working on all together? And through that process, they started kind of talking to everybody, trying out different things, and found the problem they wanted to work on, which for them was making a universal messaging layer for all of Web3. And they mostly were just doing it for fun. Actually, it was during COVID, so it was in one of their basements. And one day, they finished writing about 10,000 lines of code. They compiled and pressed go all at once, and the whole thing ran perfectly. We called it the Immaculate Commit, and that was the day that this company was born. And today, it is now a $3 billion company that's backed by some of the best funds in the world. It is making tens of millions of dollars in revenue, and they've sort of been off to the races. Now, why do I say all that? Because if you look at his career, you never would have thought that all of those things necessarily would lead to building this company. But I think Bryan himself, in a tweet he said once, said it best. When you do awesome things, awesome people gravitate towards you. And the number of times he's been working on something, not for any profit or business opportunity, but because he was genuinely super obsessed with the problem that he was working on, is what led to starting this company. And I've actually heard already from talking to a few of you some similar things. And that's all because company building opportunities really come at the intersection of domains that nobody else has combined, and often found in places where other people won't go. And I think I was talking to, can you remind me your name again? Vency earlier. And Vency, you want to just give 2 sentences on kind of the 2 unique things that you're really interested in?
Hello, everybody. I like mountain biking, and since there are so many forest fires, I think mountain bikers can replant in exchange for building mountain bike tracks. So then we can go into carbon crediting and sell the oxygen from the bike tracks to corporates and make them carbon neutral. It's a crazy idea still.
And I love that, because regardless of whether that ends up being the idea or it's something else, I can guarantee you that Vency has had more conversations at the intersection of forestry, fire, and mountain biking than anybody else in the world. And that's where you can really find a unique opportunity that nobody else sees. Now, I'm not the first person to say this, it's somewhat obvious, but 2 other great resources from this on this topic are Paul Graham's on how to do great work, and Paul Graham's of the founder of Y Combinator, and Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz on climbing the wrong hill. But oftentimes, when it comes to climate, I get asked all the time, what should I go work on that will create the most impact? And my answer to them is always, climate is everything. It touches every piece of the economy, and we're going to have to reinvent the entirety of the economy in order to solve it. And so the only thing that really matters is that you can keep coming back to it day in and day out to work on the thing that you are building. And so find that thing that fires you up. That is the most impactful thing for you to go work on. And you'll find some sort of opportunity by just being the person that is digging into it the most. And I have found, so in our Stanford class, we make everybody do 100 discovery calls over 10 weeks. That is probably more conversations on one particular topic than almost anybody has in the other environment in their life. And you can quickly become the domain expert on the intersection of 2 things with 100 conversations. And by doing that, that's where you find what we call the earned secret. So to talk about the earned secret, I want to give another story. Maya mentioned Fervo Energy earlier, and Tim Latimer is the founder of Fervo Energy. And so Tim's story begins in Ricel, Texas, a small town outside of Houston. So as you guys might know, Texas is kind of the one of the main hubs for the oil and gas industry. And Ricel, where he grew up, actually the main economic hub was the coal plant there. And so Tim kind of grew up in this environment where the natural road was to then go work for one of the large oil and gas companies. And so he went to BHP right at the beginning of the shale boom. And the shale boom was basically when horizontal drilling and fracking was invented, or at least put into practice by the US oil and gas industry, and it changed everything. It made natural gas our main energy source. It changed the US from being a net importer of energy to being a net exporter of energy. And it basically created a ton of economic value. And so Tim, kind of being in the middle of this as he was seeing all of this innovation happening, but also thinking, as many of us do, about, well, what are we going to do about the climate impacts of what the after effects of all of this are. And so he started to think of, how could we apply this type of innovation to the renewable energy industry? And as he was thinking about that, he found there's actually one industry where we do a ton of drilling already, geothermal. So he came to Stanford with the idea of, I want to figure out how to apply this massive unlock in the oil and gas industry to the geothermal world. And this was in about 2016, 2017, and I can tell you that absolutely nobody was trying to innovate in geothermal. It was a space that basically, if you talk to people, they said it's been done the same way for 200 years, and it's going to be done the same way for 200 years. Basically, people had given up on the industry changing at all. But Tim did not take that at face value. And so when Tim came to Stanford, he went through our Stanford class and basically just started having more conversations than anybody else about how could you apply horizontal drilling to the geothermal space. And what he started to realize through the conversations was that about half of the technical experts would say, yeah, you probably could figure out how to do that, and about half of them would say, can't be done. But every time he would press on the people that would say it can't be done, they wouldn't have a first principles reason for why that was the case. It all kept coming back to just nobody has done it. But when you broke it down into each step of the process, you probably theoretically could. And so Tim used that as an opportunity to say, well, let's say that we can go create that. We can go apply the ability to drill horizontally through the type of rock that most geothermal can be produced in. And so then his next idea was, we're going to go buy up all of the development rights to every piece of land where if we could do this, it would become possible. Or it would be the most opportune place to develop these kinds of projects. And so now Tim had a great idea, a great business model to go capture the value if they could do it, and he formed the company and decided to go start it, and went to basically everybody in Silicon Valley, many of the top investor names that you've heard of before, and essentially every single person said no. Why? Because even though he has figured out that insight, there are still so many challenges that stand in the way of it. These are all the things that all of the technical experts, all of the investors told Tim that he would not be able to figure out. And most of these we've been using for a long time, but then actually I was giving a similar lecture last week that Tim was watching via Zoom, and he told me to make sure to add the last one, which was, even if you figure out how to build all of these how to solve all of these technical challenges, people still think it's going to be 10 times too expensive. And so the conviction for Tim to start Fervo came from doing the work of just having more conversations, spending more time in it, and getting closer to the problem than anybody else had. But the conviction doesn't mean that the company building is going to be easy. But after essentially 7 years of knocking out every single one of these challenges, they did have something special. And so last year, when our first plant started producing electricity, the flow rates actually were the most efficient in geothermal history, and having kind of built that business model on top of it, of having all of the land rights, has made it a very special and unique company that now, as as data centers are taking off, as utilities try to go more towards renewables, it's one of the few sources of kind of 24/7 baseload energy that has come from it. Now, even if you kind of live that path of being on a little bit of a different wavelength and frequency and trying the intersection of different things, and once you have found kind of that thing that nobody else sees, where everybody thinks it's one way, but actually you've done the work to understand that it could be another way, that just gets you to the point that you have something worth starting. And then the actual challenge is building the company. And on all of the great founders that we've worked with, they have the ability to keep every single piece of the company focused around the most important thing that their company does. And in order to do that, it's constantly keeping an equilibrium of three things around the 10x advantage. And so the 10x advantage is, if you're a startup, and this is probably, I think I was just talking about it, this is especially true in Europe, nobody wants to change the way they do things to try something out or buy something from a new startup. And so it's not enough to be incrementally better than the existing way of doing things. It's about finding a problem that you can be 10 times better, an order of magnitude better than the existing way of doing things, to move the needle for people to want to use your company. And so that 10x advantage of what you do better is the thing that your entire company and every asset that you have, mostly being customers, your team, and your capital, all pointed around that. So we'll start with customers, because they're actually who tells you what your 10x advantage is. In order to do that, I want to tell a little story about Lauren Dunford. Lauren was in our Stanford class in 2017. Prior to coming to Stanford, she had worked in essentially various food processing and manufacturing plants and understood that industry well, but also realized that there was a ton of energy usage that was unoptimized within that. So when she came to Stanford, she said, I want to figure out a way to improve the energy efficiency of these factories that I've been working in for the last several years. And so her idea was to essentially create energy efficiency software that would tell you where you were using energy, where you could optimize your energy usage within the factories. But actually, she thought that in the US, that wouldn't be a 10x problem. That would be an incremental problem to go solve. But in the developing worlds, she could actually leapfrog a lot of the existing technology. And so she talked about kind of taking a different path, did something almost nobody in Silicon Valley does. She moved to Kenya, where she had some connections, and started going to flour mills, just like the one here, and trying to understand their problem around energy usage. And so she went to Africa, got a whole bunch of manufacturing plants who were interested in this and said, yeah, if you give me the software, I'll definitely use it to improve my energy efficiency, and deployed it at about 10 or 15 different factories. And she was very excited about it because they all were so excited about improving their energy efficiency. And then she deployed it and started looking at the usage of the platform. And nobody was using it. Maybe a few people would log in about once a month for about 5 minutes. And she was kind of distraught because they had told her that they would use this platform. And as she dug into it, there was one person who was using it at one factory. And so she called that person and said, do you mind if I just come and watch you for a day as you use the guide wheel platform? He said, sure. So he went to this factory and watched for the day and saw that the reason this guy was using it was not anything to do with the energy efficiency of the plant. It was because he was using it as basically an electric heartbeat of when his machines were on and when they would go down and need maintenance. And to him, a machine being down even for 5 minutes meant losing tons of revenue. And so the only thing he cared about, that was an order of magnitude 10x problem for him, was knowing when the machines were going to be broken or when they were online. And so these were kind of the initial things where they could see that these were coming down. And so Lauren said, wow, I have now found my 10x problem. This is actually the thing that we need to build around. So she quickly pivoted, changed the software to be around understanding uptime of machinery. And as she did that, also got to control the energy usage of the machines. So today, Guidewheel is launched throughout not just Africa. They have now launched in many, many factories across the US, Mexico, across the world, where essentially everybody is using it to understand the uptime of their machines, but she gets to do the thing that drives her to wake up and work on this every morning, which is increase their energy efficiency of all of these factories. And I think early in my life, I used to think that big companies were just kind of lazy and lethargic, and that you would just outwork them if you were a startup, and that's how startups make it. But that's absolutely not the case. Big companies are extremely good at their one 10x thing that they do better than anybody else. And the only advantage a startup actually has is to quickly pivot until they find that that one thing that nobody else is doing to the caliber that they can do it. And so the only advantage for a startup is to stand as close to the customer as they can until they find that problem that isn't being solved, and find a way to fit their business into that. The next thing that you have to balance and keep focused around that 10x is team. One of the companies that came out of our Stanford class is called Molten Industries, and Molten makes graphite. And Kevin gave, the founder of Molten, gave a talk in our class about a month ago, talking about how the only people he has hired in the beginning are the people that work on the core reactor that they are building. He has tons of other things that need to get done, but he hasn't hired for a single one of them because focus and speed are a startup's greatest strength. And so he has built his team, kept his team small, especially in the beginning, to be able to change those pivots and only work on the thing that is going to be the core advantage of the company. This we'll talk about this in terms of capital too, but especially in the early days, keeping all of your talent, which 90% of your cost in the first couple of years are going to be towards the salary of the people that you're hiring. And you want all of those resources to be driving the change that is your order of magnitude improvement. And then he also had some suggestions on how to make sure that you're finding the right people, because the reality is in the early days, everybody has to do everything and can't be singularly focused. And so you need the people that you need to find them by trying them in action. And then I think one thing that second-time founders tend to focus on more than first-time founders is, well, that's great. We want the people who are kind of focused on the 10x, and we want to be able to hire them individually. But at some point, the company is going to grow far beyond anything that you individually can control. And so Matteo Jaramillo, who was one of the founders of Tesla Energy, and then went on to go found Form Energy. This was the picture of his company from, I think, 3 years ago, and so it's exploded far beyond that at this point. But one of the things that they ensure is that in the beginning, every single person they hire also has the same focus on that 10x and that same the same kind of culture and values that that they're going to spread to all of the people that they hire, because that's how you're going to define kind of where the company gets focused as it expands far beyond what you as an individual can control. Investors and capital. This is the last kind of piece of the stack to keep focused around your most important thing. So this is a meme that Tim Latimer of Fervo Energy created a couple of years ago. Fundraising and venture capital and all of that, it can feel very overwhelming, But the reality is the best fundraisers realize that it only boils down to two things. One is these, as many of the founders in here know, these company building journeys are long and they are difficult, especially if you're building a climate tech company. It can be 10 years and $1 billion before you even see anything actually being produced. And you're going to have to get through every single one of those challenges that was listed on that slide. And so it's really nothing more than when you're finding investors, it's finding the people that you want around the table for the next 10 years. You're really signing up for that long of a relationship, and you're trying to find the people that are going to work with you through each challenge, are going to keep coming back, and are going to understand that your journey is not going to be linear, and that you're going to have to go in different ways. And then it's every single round, every single dollar of capital that you raise should be matched to one risk, and that's whatever the most pressing risk in front of your 10x opportunity is. So, what does that look like if you're starting a climate tech company? In the beginning days, it's really just about, is there something possible here? We'll talk about research in a second, but it's trying to understand, does this break the laws of physics, or is this something that theoretically you could do? And if we did do it, do we know where that hair on fire problem is? Do we know what the thing that it would unlock us to be able to do 10 times better than anybody else would be? And then oftentimes you'll go through some sort of incubator or accelerator, not always. It's really more about, do you have kind of that community where you can explore it, get a little bit closer, understand exactly who the customer is. And then once you go out to raise, it's really about trying to find those people who are going to help you with the first few steps of the company building journey. And as you keep going down, there's kind of more and more ways to finance it. But really the important message is that every time you go out to get a dollar, whether it's a research grant, whether it is going through one of the incubator programs, whether it's raising venture capital, whether it's raising project finance, it's about understanding what is every single one of those dollars going towards, and does that match with what the most important risk of the company is? And I kind of always see that those risks, basically depending on the stage of the company, match up with one of four key risks. First one being, is this technically feasible, as we talked about? The second one being product market fit. Is there actually somebody who will buy this? Not just tells me they will buy it, but in the Lauren Dunford case, do I actually see them using it and it being a core part of how they do their day-to-day? Deeper in the company, it then becomes, the core risk becomes distribution. So we know who that customer is. Do we know who the next 10 or the next 100 or the next 1,000, depending on what the company is trying to do, are, and do we know how to actually go reach them and sell to them? And then as you progress beyond that, it becomes, well, can we actually do this in a way that's profitable, that lets us do this, that earns us the right to do this forever? And obviously, you always want to be thinking about each of those things, even from the beginning. But really, every time you go out to fundraise, it's just every single dollar needs to be pointed at whichever is my biggest risk. So as an example of that, Furno Materials is a company we helped build in the cement space, decarbonized cement production. And in the beginning days, when we raised our seed round, the only thing we really had to show was that we could build this particular type of kiln that we wanted to invent as small and as effectively as we thought we could. And one of the things that had to be done was basically smashing these pellets together. And so we were going to buy something called a briquetter for $2 million out of a $5 million round. Not insignificant. Now, there were ways to get these pellets created for far more expensive than it would than buying it, but on a much smaller scale. And as we asked ourselves the question, do we need this briquetter in order to prove the core risk, which is just, is this technically feasible? And the answer was no. So we had to build it more expensive in the early days, but without spending all of our equity capital on something that didn't validate the core risk at the time for the company. And so at each of these stages, there's these are kind of these are actually the ones from our Stanford class that have funded the most companies coming out of our class at each of these stages. So I kind of just wanted to give an example of, at least in the US, what it looks like. And I'm sure there's kind of a parallel for each geography, and especially out here. But the main thing being kind of, as you go through the journey, do you have people who are putting in money aligned with what you know the core risk of the company to be? So diving into that first block a little bit, I wanted to talk about research and kind of how it can help you find that 10x advantage. And I think the most important thing when it comes to research is still that same idea of, can you get outside of the lab, go have those conversations, understand who you're actually building this thing for, bring that back into the lab to keep iterating on where the technology goes. And so I've seen this successfully in kind of 3 different ways. One is direct research. So on the left, we've got Eric McShane and Evan Gardner, who were postdocs at Stanford, who were working on a lithium extraction technology. And throughout our class, they basically would go talk to people to understand, well, if we made lithium in this way, or extracted lithium in this way, would you buy it? What purity would it need to be? All of these questions that they would then keep going back into the lab to change the trajectory of where their research was going, until they found something that they actually knew there would be a customer and a market for, which turned into their company, Electroflow Technologies. Another really interesting way is combining that university research with either national labs or research coming from industry. And in the US, we have some great national labs that are spread all throughout the country, where they're just producing technology and IP that is there for the taking, essentially, because nobody at these national labs actually usually ends up going to become the entrepreneur themselves. And so Vern is a company doing essentially hydrogen compression storage. And when they started, they were researchers at both Stanford and Cal Berkeley, who essentially throughout the journey of their technology and leaving the classroom to go figure out where they should take it next, pivoted 3 times in the 10 weeks they were in our class, and then another 3 times in the 6 months after they left our class. Because every time they would go out, they would kind of understand, okay, well, this is what the customer needs. Now, how do we go find that technology? And they would go to Lawrence Livermore National Lab in the Bay Area, or they would go to BMW, who they knew who had done a lot of this technology research already, and essentially just go find where the best technology that matched that customer need was. And so it was a great iteration of leaving the classroom, understanding something, going and finding technology somewhere else, and then bringing it back. And as you can kind of notice from the pattern, almost never is just the pure research that you start with the technology that you end up building it around. It always changes and shifts. There's probably only one time ever that I have seen it be directly the same technology from the start, and that was Holocene, which is a direct air capture company that actually last week was acquired by Occidental. But the reason that she was able to do it with the same technology from the start was for 7 years she was the head of research for a carbon capture company called Climeworks, and so basically had already seen and done all of this iteration and research to find the exact right technology, again, at a national lab, which they were just dying for her to turn into a company, and was able to spin it out. Past the research, again, talking about the funding of each stage and matching it, I kind of wanted to just give a case study of what it actually looks like to do that. And so this is Fervo Energy's journey in fundraising. And again, the main thing I want to point out is that it's, to date, just to produce one power plant that they're working on in Nevada, and in Utah, actually, they have 2 now. It's taken over $600 million and over 8 years to get there. And as you can see, kind of at each step of the journey, bringing in different types of funds, bringing in different types of strategic investors, using different types of government grants to kind of stitch it all together. And so the main idea being that you're kind of always fundraising as a founder. And the most important thing is to A, find the people that are going to be there throughout this whole thing, and B, make sure that each one of those investors knows exactly what the core risk is and that their capital is going towards that. So in building these companies, again, the patterns that I've seen emerge are always that they take very nonlinear paths to get there, and that's what gives them the thing that they're fired up around, which is what lets them kind of find the unique insight that that nobody else has on how to go approach a market. And then they just keep every single asset of their company circling around that most important thing. And the last thing I want to leave you guys with, has everybody seen Free Solo? Does anybody know who Alex Honnold is? Or this is not too far from Stanford and Silicon Valley. This is in Yosemite National Park. But we often use this as an analogy for entrepreneurship of scaling, of free soloing the wall, where you never know, you don't know what the path is, and you just have to figure it out as you're going, but it's also high stakes the whole way. And I think it's best encapsulated by Jensen Huang, the founder of NVIDIA, probably the best founder in the world right now. When he was asked kind of what he would tell his younger self right before starting the company, he basically said that he wouldn't do it, right? Because it's just, these journeys are so long and difficult, and I think in the climate space in particular, it's longer journeys and bigger projects and actually building things, but the thing to understand is there's kind of a community that celebrates that. And being within that is what lets you go start these things and lets you kind of feed into that obsession and that passion that you have of whatever it is. So I love that you guys have this this community and this organization. Keep a part of it because it's the only thing that lets you scale these huge heights and actually go build these companies. So once again, thank you guys all for having me. It's been very fun to get to know you all. And if you have any questions or anything that you want to dive into, I am here to talk through it all.